When the world tightens, most people panic. They look at the headlines, the shrinking markets, the rising pressure, and they freeze. But contraction isn't the enemy, it's the spotlight. It exposes who built on a foundation of wisdom and who built on sand. The truth is simple, the world doesn't get easier, you get sharper. The economy contracts, but your discipline doesn't have to. The global system slows down, but your decisions don't have to. When everything around you compresses, you discover whether your mind expands or collapses. Every crisis hands you two choices: complain like everyone else or reorganize your life so you never depend on circumstances again. This isn't about predicting markets or waiting for miracles. It's about thinking clearly when most people chase noise. It's about choosing rationality over emotion. It's about strengthening your habits, your skills, and your financial backbone so you can stand upright in conditions that make everyone else fold. Global contraction is not a punishment. It's an invitation, and those who treat it as an invitation rise higher than they ever imagined. Discipline is the only stability you will ever own, especially when the world around you is contracting and shifting in ways you cannot control. When economies tighten, when markets shake, when society starts operating from fear instead of clarity, people look for something outside themselves to hold on to. They wait for governments to stabilize the environment, for companies to secure their futures, for circumstances to give them a sign that things will get better. But relying on anything external during a global contraction is like trying to grab smoke. True stability does not come from the world. It comes from the structure you build inside yourself. Discipline becomes the anchor that holds your life in place when everything else feels like it's moving. And most people fail during these periods, not because the world became too hard, but because they never built the internal framework to handle pressure. When the economy shrinks, opportunities don't disappear, they simply move to those who are prepared. Discipline is what keeps you prepared. It forces you to wake up early when others decide to sleep in because times are tough. It pushes you to learn new skills while others complain that the job market is unfair. It keeps you consistent when everyone else becomes inconsistent. Discipline isn't just a routine, it is a mindset that refuses to surrender to chaos. It allows you to stay calm when everyone is panicking, focused when everyone is distracted, productive when everyone is idle. The world might be contracting, but discipline ensures that your potential is always expanding. You become the kind of person who doesn't wait for opportunity, you create it. People underestimate how much a global contraction is psychological. Yes, markets change, cries, businesses struggle, but the largest contraction happens inside people's minds. They shrink. They doubt themselves. They stop taking action. They let fear dictate their decisions. Discipline is the antidote to that shrinking. It keeps your mind sharp, your emotions stable, and your actions aligned with your long-term goals. When you commit to discipline, you remove the need for motivation. You don't ask yourself whether you feel like doing something, you simply do it. You eliminate the emotional roller coaster that ruins most people's lives during difficult times. You become a person who chooses consistency over comfort and clarity over chaos. Your discipline becomes the one part of your life that is never negotiable, no matter what the world looks like. During a global contraction, discipline also shapes your financial decisions. Most people respond to fear by either overspending to feel better or freezing and doing nothing. A disciplined person tracks expenses, builds savings, reduces unnecessary purchases, and increases earning capacity. Discipline creates habits that protect you. Saving instead of wasting, budgeting instead of guessing, investing instead of hoping, working instead of waiting. It makes you deliberate with your money, intentional with your time, and strategic with your opportunities. A disciplined person becomes financially stronger in environments where undisciplined people crumble. The contraction doesn't destroy them, it sharpens them. Discipline also determines how you use the extra pressure. Pressure can either break you or build you depending on your structure. Without discipline, pressure feels like weight pushing you down. With discipline, pressure becomes resistance training that makes you stronger. You learn to push through discomfort, to stay committed even when the results are slow, to ignore the fear-driven narratives that consume the average person. Discipline gives you the emotional toughness to treat challenges as fuel, not obstacles. You stop seeing contraction as danger and start seeing it as leverage because you know that most of the world will quit, hesitate, or retreat, leaving room for those who stay committed. Finally, discipline becomes the blueprint for your identity. In uncertain times, identity is everything. If you see yourself as undisciplined, you will act like someone who is waiting to be saved by better conditions. But if you see yourself as a disciplined individual, someone who holds the line no matter what, you act like a leader of your own life. Discipline turns you into someone who is not dictated by the environment but rises above it. You become the stability the world wishes it had, the person who stays consistent when everything else becomes unpredictable, the individual who grows while others contract, the anchor in a storm that everyone else hopes for but never builds themselves. Your mind creates your reality, especially during times when the world is contracting and uncertainty becomes the default state of society. Most people believe their struggles are caused by the external world, by the markets collapsing, by businesses failing, by rising prices or shrinking opportunities. They think the contraction happening outside is the reason their life feels smaller. But But the truth is far more confronting. The biggest contraction is happening inside them. Their thoughts tighten before their circumstances do. Their beliefs shrink long before the economy shrinks. When the world becomes unstable, the average person's mindset collapses faster than any market ever will. This is why two people can face the exact same environment, the same conditions, the same challenges, yet one rises and the other falls. The difference isn't luck, intelligence, or timing, it is the internal world they've built. Your mind is the lens through which you experience everything. If that lens is fogged with fear, doubt, anxiety, and scarcity, then even the smallest challenge looks impossible. In a global contraction, this becomes even more dangerous because fear spreads quickly, uncertainty becomes contagious, and negativity becomes the default mindset of millions. If you let the collective fear infect your thinking, you begin to see limitation everywhere. You start believing that opportunities are gone, that the future is bleak, that effort is pointless. Once your mind accepts that narrative, your actions follow, and your reality starts matching the negativity you've allowed in. This is how people unconsciously create the very outcomes they fear. They shrink mentally, and their life shrinks with them. But if your mind is conditioned to focus on clarity, growth, resilience, and personal responsibility, the same external conditions begin to look different. Instead of seeing danger, you see openings. Instead of seeing scarcity, you see areas where you can grow stronger. Instead of seeing contraction as a wall, you see it as a doorway that only those with discipline and certainty can walk through. Your mind becomes the filter that transforms chaos into opportunity. Your thoughts stop being driven by fear and become driven by strategic awareness. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "How do I use this to become stronger?" That single shift creates a completely different reality even when the world remains the same. The mind determines how you respond to pressure. In times of contraction, many people choose escapism, scrolling, entertainment, distraction, denial. Their mind is looking for comfort instead of control. But a strong mind chooses awareness, action, and alignment. It looks directly at the situation without emotional distortion. It observes the environment not as something to fear, but as something to understand. This clarity allows you to make decisions that others are too overwhelmed to consider. Your thoughts become the stabilizing force that guides your behavior, even when everything around you feels unstable. Your mind also determines the standards you accept for yourself. When people believe the world is falling apart, they lower their standards. They allow themselves to slack, to procrastinate, to settle for less than they're capable of. They tell themselves that tough times justify weak choices. But a strong mind raises its standards during contraction. It demands more consistency, more focus, more discipline, and more awareness. It knows that your reality is always shaped by what you tolerate internally. If you think small, act small, and feel small, your world will shrink to match. But if you think powerfully, act intentionally, and feel capable, your world expands even in an environment built on limitation. The mind also controls your ability to endure uncertainty. During global contraction, there are no guarantees. Outcomes are unpredictable. People panic because they want certainty, and when they don't get it, they paralyze themselves with overthinking. A strong mind understands that certainty doesn't come from predicting the environment. It comes from trusting your ability to respond to anything. You stop demanding that the world be stable and start becoming the source of stability yourself. You learn to live with uncertainty without breaking. You stop fearing the unknown and start preparing for it. This internal confidence becomes a shield against external volatility. Your mind is the first battleground and the final advantage. If you win inside, you win outside. If you lose inside, nothing external can save you. Global contraction is not the reason people fail. It is the magnifier of the mindset they already carried. The world shrinks, but your thoughts decide whether you shrink with it or expand beyond it. You either become the prisoner of your own fear or the architect of your own reality. And that choice is made long before the world changes. It's made inside your mind every single day. Control the controllables is the foundation of power. When the world enters a period of contraction and everything feels unpredictable, most people lose themselves during these times because they direct all their energy toward things they can't influence: the economy, the news, the global markets, inflation, political decisions, layoffs, interest rates, and the behavior of others. They exhaust themselves trying to mentally fight what is completely outside their reach. This creates a constant state of fear, anxiety, and paralysis because the external world will always be unstable. The more you try to control what isn't yours to command, the weaker you become. The more you shift your focus toward what is actually within your grasp, the stronger and more effective you become. During contraction, the difference between those who collapse and those who rise is simple. The ones who rise take full command of the things they can influence every single day. You cannot control the economy, but you can control your discipline. You cannot control your company's decisions, but you can control how valuable you become. You cannot control inflation, but you can control your spending, your habits, your skill set, and your income strategies. You cannot control the chaos of the world, but you can control your internal order. This shift immediately changes how you experience global contraction. Instead of feeling small and powerless, you begin to operate from a place of personal certainty. You become grounded, deliberate, and centered. You stop reacting to life and start responding to it with purpose, because you're focused on the actions that genuinely move your life forward, rather than the noise that keeps everyone else distracted. Most people destroy their mental state by worrying about the wrong things. They spend hours thinking about what might happen, what could go wrong, what others might do, or how external events might affect them. This drains their emotional and physical energy until they have nothing left for the things that actually matter. When you commit to controlling the controllables, you cut off that mental noise at the root. You don't entertain thoughts that lead nowhere. You don't allow your mind to spiral into what-ifs that serve no purpose. You redirect your focus to the tasks, habits, and decisions that you can execute right now. This singular shift drastically increases your mental clarity, emotional stability, and personal power. Your mind stops being a battlefield and becomes a command center. Controlling the controllables also means taking extreme ownership over your actions and outcomes. When times get hard, people naturally start looking for excuses. They blame the economy, blame circumstances, blame timing, blame luck, blame leadership, anything to avoid taking responsibility for their own behavior. But you cannot overcome contraction with blame. You overcome it by taking absolute command of your routine, your consistency, your choices, and your work ethic. Ownership gives you leverage because it removes the illusion that your life depends on things outside yourself. When you take ownership, you stop feeling like a victim of external forces and start feeling like the architect of your future. This mindset directly impacts your behavior. If you can control it, you do it faithfully. If you cannot control it, you detach from it immediately. Your daily routine becomes structured around execution, waking up early, training your body, sharpening your skills, managing your money, building income streams, improving your relationships, and reinforcing your mental strength. These are the controllables that shape your life regardless of what the world is doing. When you master these, contraction becomes less threatening because your stability comes from your habits, not from your circumstances. This principle also protects your emotional state. People who try to control the uncontrollable live in constant frustration because the world will always be unpredictable. But when you narrow your attention to what you can influence, you reclaim emotional balance. You stop letting global events dictate your mood. You stop letting the news dictate your thoughts. You stop letting uncertainty dictate your choices. Your emotional health becomes grounded in your behaviors, your standards, and your internal dialogue. This gives you resilience while others break under pressure. Finally, controlling the controllables builds unshakable confidence. Confidence isn't built from knowing the future, it's built from trusting yourself to handle whatever arrives. When you know you are disciplined, capable, consistent, focused, and resilient, you stop fearing contraction, you stop fearing challenges, you stop fearing uncertainty. You know that no matter what the world does, you can respond with strength. Confidence becomes the byproduct of intentional effort, not external validation. And in a world shrinking under pressure, the person who controls the controllables becomes the person who stays unbreakable while everyone else falls apart. Building your circle of competence becomes one of the most powerful tools during global contraction because it forces you to operate from clarity instead of chaos. When the world tightens and uncertainty rises, most people start reaching for answers everywhere. They jump into industries they don't understand, chase trends they can't explain, follow advice they never verify, and make decisions rooted in fear rather than comprehension. This scatterbrained approach is exactly why contraction hits them harder. They overextend into areas where they lack knowledge, and when conditions shift, they don't have the understanding to navigate what they stepped into. A circle of competence protects you from that. It keeps you focused on what you truly know, what you can actually master, and what you can execute without guessing. It becomes your strategic shelter in a world where everyone else is running blindly. A circle of competence is the boundary of what you understand deeply enough to make confident and intelligent decisions. It's not about being a genius. It's about being honest with yourself about what you know and what you don't. Most people hate that kind of honesty. They want to believe they're good at everything, capable of everything, knowledgeable about everything, but pretending you understand something doesn't make it true. In a global contraction, pretending is costly. Misjudging a business model, misunderstanding an investment, or stepping into a skill you haven't mastered becomes dangerous when the environment is unforgiving. Staying inside your circle means you are playing a game you know how to win. You're not guessing. You're operating with awareness, skill, and grounded judgment. This principle gives you a significant advantage because contraction amplifies mistakes. During times of economic expansion, even poor decisions can get masked by overall growth, but in contraction, every weakness is exposed. People who operate outside their circle of competence get hit the hardest because they can't anticipate challenges, can't see risks early, and can't execute solutions fast enough. Meanwhile, individuals who stay inside their circle maintain stability. They understand the terrain they're playing on. They see dangers coming before others notice them. They adapt faster because they know the rules of the environment they operate in. The world might be shifting, but they aren't lost in areas they never took the time to learn. At the same time, your circle of competence is not meant to be small forever. It should expand deliberately through disciplined learning and direct experience. This is where most people fail. They try to expand their circle during contraction by rushing into new fields without doing the work to master them. Real expansion happens through studying, practicing, applying, and observing. It does not happen through shortcuts, wishful thinking, or imitation. When you commit to slowly and deliberately expanding your circle, you prepare yourself for future opportunities without exposing yourself to unnecessary risk. You grow stronger without gambling your stability. You become someone who is constantly evolving, but in a controlled and intelligent way. In a global contraction, a well-defined circle of competence also increases your ability to make clear and confident decisions. Uncertainty creates emotional decision-making. People make choices driven by panic, desperation, or impatience, but when you're operating inside a domain where you understand the nuances, your decisions are grounded. You don't get overwhelmed by noise. You don't get thrown off by fluctuations or temporary setbacks. You can distinguish real threats from exaggerated ones. You can identify real opportunities instead of illusions. Your decision-making improves not because the world becomes easier, but because your thinking becomes sharper. Your circle of competence also gives you a sense of identity. In tough times, identity matters because it guides how you respond to stress. If you don't know who you are or what you're good at, you become fragile under pressure. You start looking for external approval or direction, and that makes you vulnerable. But when you know exactly what you are skilled at, what you can rely on, and where your strengths lie, you stand firm even when the environment shakes. You have a foundation inside yourself that isn't dictated by outside circumstances. The power of this principle becomes especially clear in your financial and career decisions. When people operate outside their circle, they fall for hype, trends, and shortcuts. They switch careers impulsively, jump into investments they don't understand, or start businesses without knowing the fundamentals. But when you operate inside your circle, you pursue paths where you can perform at a high level. You build income streams in fields where you can actually compete. You invest in areas where you understand the drivers of success. You choose jobs, businesses, and skills that fit your strengths. This alignment creates resilience because you're not guessing your way through life. You're strategically navigating it. Building and staying within your circle of competence during global contraction creates a grounding force that protects you from panic, from mistakes, and from self-sabotage. It allows you to move through a shrinking world with clarity and effectiveness while others drown in confusion. And as you expand that circle through intentional learning, you become capable of thriving in environments that overwhelm the average person.